Hi, everybody. Welcome back. You know me. I'm Professor Peter Joseph, your stylish scientist, and I want to give you, in the spirit of Jerry Springer, my final thoughts about happiness. When you ask people what makes them happy, and some of the feedback I've gotten from people reflects this as well, they list a whole bunch of things. It makes me happy to hug my child. It makes me happy to walk my dog. It makes me happy to have a nice, juicy steak or something, right? Well, the problem here is if you just ask people what makes them happy, you get this noise, like this chaos, and so people focus on the specific things that make them happy, but that doesn't allow us to understand deeper patterns in happiness. Happiness, of course, is the flip side to depression, and so we have really good reason to try to understand happiness because depression is a problem for individuals, it's a problem for society, it's a problem for the workplace, and all of that, right? So we often miss, whether it be for willful ignorance or just blindness, what are the deeper patterns in the world that make people happy. It doesn't mean there aren't idiosyncratic weird things that make people happy. That's totally possible. But nevertheless, there is a signal out there, and good science is geared at detecting what is the signal and distinguishing it from the noise. There's always error in the model, right? Take food for an example, right? So you pursue food to satisfy a motivational state, a drive in your body that says, go find and capture resources to consume. Yeah? But the manner by which you satisfy that need doesn't have to be tightly bound. Now, it's a little bit bound, right? So eating rocks, for example, doesn't satisfy that need unless you have some kind of pathology, which is, of course, let's be honest, extremely rare. Although psychology likes to obsess about pathologies, these anomalies, most people are like most people. But you say, well, people in China eat this and people in Thailand eat this. So that's the noise. What people are trying to do is find ways in their local ecology, given their local culture, to satisfy this motivational state of I must consume resources, right? And so people get lost in the specifics because the specifics are personal to them. Science is a relatively unpersonal process, trying to say, okay, yes, you like steak, you like sushi, yes, okay, all those things, fine. But underneath all of that, what makes you happy, what satisfies that drive, right, is the consumption of resources. Right? So I want to put forth what are basically just the three take-home points. This is our summary, right? The three take-home points. And the last one I'll spend a little more time on. But the first one is that the majority, not all, but the majority and the strongest happiness that we will experience in our life is based on the satisfaction of deep, evolved, adaptive needs, like hunger, I've already given you as an example, arousal, right, sexual arousal, love as another one, right, love, a lot of people often think of love as an emotion, but it's probably best conceptualized as a motivational state because it makes you do things, right, it makes you sacrifice, right, the mom sacrifices for their child, the husband sacrifices for his family, that type of thing, right, and what they do in the deep, deep, deep way is they solve the primary fundamental problems of a biological organism, right? Making babies and surviving, right? So someone who has love in their life, okay, is more likely to survive. Someone who has love, romantic love, is more likely to make babies. And so your ability to satisfy those deep needs has been served by the evolution of different motivational systems, right? So physiologically, systems like hunger is one, but there are social systems, of course, as well, right? So, and this is not unique to people, right? This is unique probably at least to mammals, if not to many species, all right? So remember, these are motivational states, and so motivational states are considered to be things that evolved to satisfy some need, yeah? Point two is that I would contend to you that an examination of these deeper needs in your life in terms of how they are deficient, how you're not yet satisfied with those things. Like you don't have enough food, you're going to be unhungry. If you don't have enough social connections, you're going to be unhappy. We know nowadays there's a loneliness epidemic. Well, why are people so unhappy? Well, because they're disconnected to people. Indeed, one of the more convincing hypotheses about why people get so depressed in the winter is not because of the sunlight. It's because when the weather is crap, people don't go out. And so you don't socialize anymore, all right? So my contention then is that you have a better understanding of what these deficiencies are in your life. You will decrease the depression in your life, and you will increase the happiness in your life, because the awareness would lead to finding ways to solve those problems. You're not instead of fixating on the noise, you're saying, okay, what are the fundamental problems in my life, right? And this is a lot of what psychologists can do for you, is to help you identify, well, what is it that you really care about? Well, I can tell you as a biologist, what you really care about are things like these evolved motivational systems, whether they be physiological or psychological systems, right? And most people really don't have any problem with this physiological system. These are rather basic, right? Oh yeah, we agree, right? We agree that food is a physiological system and you must have food, right? It's the psychological ones that don't get as much positive attention, because we like to think of people as precious little snowflakes, and everybody's different, and working out an underlying taxonomy of what people really need socially, psychologically, is the challenge. And this is why I put forth this idea of the fundamental social motives as a candidate for an array of social needs that you have and you will have had throughout human evolution, and that satisfying them will make you more happy. My last contention, and this is the one we'll spend more time on, is that I think you should pursue, for the greatest amount and the longest lasting happiness, you should pursue expensive strategies to solving those fundamental social motives, not cheap ones, right? And so the expensive ones are long-term solutions. They often reflect internal effort, so you might have to change your nature a little bit, right? Going to the gym is effortful. It tells the world, look at the discipline that this person has, for example, right? As well as, just as another stupid example, just as well as the quality of the clothes people wear, right? They advertise something about your internal value system, and those some value systems are more positive in the world than other value systems, right? And of course, these long-term solutions, these expensive ones, are likely to be healthier as well. And so what I'm going to do now, quickly, is go through the fundamental social motives and give you some examples of cheap solutions as well as expensive solutions to give you a sense of what I mean. So let's take my favorites first, right? Let's start with mate seeking. So the easy ones would be porn, Tinder, and the emerging amazingness of sex robots. These are cheap ways of satisfying the mate-seeking mentality. But expensive ones are things like monogamous dating, marriage, right? Things that you do in person, investing in individuals, getting the feedback from the world that your body and your brain really wants. Those are the healthier options, right? Tinder is a cheap substitute. Sex robots are even cheaper. Well, they're very expensive, right? But they're still a cheap substitute. Moving on to my favorite, status seeking. Well, look, it's pretty easy. It just comes down to fast and fake, right? So it's fast money, fast fashion, fake watches, fake, what else? Fake cars, kit cars, fake cologne, right? Working as an OnlyFans model as a woman, maybe, or a drug dealer as a man, or a stripper as a woman, for example. As a man, of course, but male strippers make way less than female strippers, as you can imagine. And pornography, being a porn actress as well would do the same, has the same phenomenon. Now, for status seeking in the long term, it's kind of the opposite. It's pursuing education. It's building social alliances. It's effortful. It's hard work, right? It's building a wardrobe over many years, for example. And maybe it's not spending thousands of dollars on suits, but it's spending less money on quality things that you take care of. That's also a way of status seeking, but a more expensive option, right? So not fast fashion like Zara, but more expensive fashion. Like, so for example, my suit here, this is from a place called Grand Lamar. This is a Swedish company. I get them made to measure. I invest in quality clothes. Why? Because I'm not going to change much in my body. And I'm trying to tell the world, remember, that I am a status attained or attaining man. So I'm put together. Okay, moving on from me, of course, my favorite topic, as you know. Now, the other ones I'm not as good at because my expertise, of course, as you know, are mostly in mate seeking and status seeking. Yeah, I know, the joke, yeah. Personally and professionally. Ha ha ha. Okay? But avoiding diseases. Well, the cheap way of avoiding diseases would be doing things like taking supplements, for example, right? Using this antibacterial lotion that people started using during COVID. Masks as well were something of a short solution, especially because a lot of people weren't even wearing the right masks, right? So forget the fact that masks probably didn't really help us. But many of the people wearing the masks weren't wearing the medically super graded, right? They were just a piece of cloth over your face, just to shut the police up, more or less, right? But it made them feel, some of the people, just having a mask on, made them feel safer. This is the illusion of safety. We love our illusions, right? In this case, avoiding diseases is a form of feeling safer. But the more expensive ones would be to invest in things like exercise, whole foods, right? I'm doing the carnivore diet now, for example, like that as well. But also maybe getting to the doctor regularly, getting regular checkups, right? Grandma Pauline regularly says, Peter, did you get checked up? You should go every year or so, get your heart rate done. And of course, I don't, right? And men are notoriously bad at this, right? One reason why my father died, probably, is because by the time he decided to go to the doctor, the cancer had spread too much, had metastasized too much, that it didn't make a difference, right? So if he had gotten regular checkups, the doctor might have detected it earlier, and then maybe my father would be alive, right? Okay, moving on to just safety in general. So instead of diseases, which is a unique challenge, because you can't see diseases, so they pose a unique challenge, safety are just the physical properties of the world, right? So one way of staying safe would be simply just don't go out, right? Like with COVID, for example, right? So, let's just stay home. Well, is that a viable option? Like maybe you can, maintain distance from other people, or maybe this thing we used to do when you had to cough or sneeze, you did this thing like this. You covered your face, right? People don't seem to do that anymore. It's amazing to me. That's the cheap option, staying home. It's not really a viable option, but it feels good. I'm doing something, right? Similarly to all these kind of invasive new agey treatments, they often make people feel like they're getting treated for something, like this cupping stuff that people do. It feels like it must be making you better, but there's no evidence that it does make you better. Okay? But there are ways to engage in the world safely without being in an expensive way. So graded, gradual risk taking. Like, say, in training of martial arts or in the training of your body, right? You don't start as an expert, right? So you build to it, right? So in Aikido, you didn't take the big crazy falls in the beginning. You had to learn how to take the big crazy falls. You slowly took more risks, and you learned how to be safe, even in the fact that the world is not always a safe place, for example, right? So a long-term solution, as opposed to, you want to feel safe, just, for example, go buy a gun or something like that, right? And indeed, that gets us to the next one of protecting family. Well, there are cheap ways to protect the family, like we're going to buy a gun in the house, right? Let's have lots of kids, right? So instead of investing in few kids and protecting them and putting them, giving them a life of safety and all this, we just invest in lots of kids. But the expensive option here might be move. You live in a dangerous place, move. This happens a lot, for example, in New York, right? So where I grew up in New York is a place called Fairfield County. And this is basically where the well-to-do of New York take their kids to raise them up in a safer environment than living in the city. Because let's be honest, cities are more threatening more dangerous, and not just perceived to be, but they are, of course. Um, and so we moved to Greenwich and Stamford and all these places, right? Because these are strategies to keep your family safe. But of course, not everyone can afford this. So this is why it's an expensive option. Moving is expensive. Right? Okay, let's move on to friends now. Making friends is, maintaining friendships. Well, one easy way of friendships, and for example, my ex-girlfriend Pam and I she can attest to this. You have, at some point in your life, you go out to the bar a lot, well, you can have bar friends. And your bar friends are low investment, right? They're not going to help you move. They're not going to drive an hour to come to your party. And we have these experiences, right? And so bar friends are cheap friends, right? Another cheap way of friends is to use your mate-seeking efforts to convert people into friends, right? So you meet people on Tinder and you make them your friends. You go on a date and it doesn't work, they become your friends. Well, they're not really your friends. This is like faux mate-seeking as a way of converting people. Or maybe it's a time that you keep assessing whether somebody is a potential partner or something, but it's cheap. Slow friends would be fraternities, sororities, community engagement, shared interest, even Star Trek, right? If I was still into Star Trek, that might lead me to forming more long-term invested friends. Now I go to fashion events, I go to cigar bars with men that have similar values, similar interests as I do. And you form real friendships, right? Or we hope, at least, as opposed to just, right, going to the bar, drinking, doing shots, dancing when you can't hear anything anyways, okay? After friends, we get to autonomy. The autonomy is a little bit like, on the cheap side, it's a little bit like being an avoidant, right, in terms of your attachment, right? You go backpacking, you do Erasmus, and you stay single, right? You maintain a singleness, even I want to be independent, right? So autonomy is not necessarily independence, but the cheap version of it is independence. Instead, expensive autonomy would be cultivating interdependence, right? You're still your own person, right? You have my sense of identity, my sense of individuality. Indeed, that's what one of the pathologies that's associated with avoidant attachment kind of issues is this fear of engulfment, right? That you lose yourself in the relationship with someone else. And so when you feel any sort of emotions coming on, you run away because I feel like I'm losing my autonomy. But good relationships, whether they be sexual or not, are interdependent, not dependent. Independence is a surefire way to, well, today, satisfy this insecurity you have of fear of engulfment, for example, this fear you have. It's, in the long run, it doesn't work out because you're left alone in the end. And we don't really want to be alone. Indeed, avoidants don't really want to be alone. They just have what's called an approach avoidance conflict. They don't want to be alone, approach, but they're afraid of being engulfed, the avoidance part of the conflict. And this is their dilemma. And they vacillate. And a lot of their behavior and their attitudes and things they do to other people are part of this vacillation. All right? So that's it for me. I hope you liked this conversation today and the conversations thus far about happiness. Like, share, comment, tell us in the bottom. Tell us the kinds of things that make you happy and why you think they make you happy. Or conversely, the things that make you sad, right? And why you think they make you sad. And maybe give some thought to this idea that this all might boil down to deeper evolutionary needs that you might have. All right? Ciao.